That is my mental orient. See, this is what's in his mind. He says, this is how I live. I have faith in Jesus, and the way I think about Jesus is somebody who loves me and gave himself for me. Notice he doesn't say this. Notice he doesn't say, here's the way I live my life in the flesh, by faith in the Son of God who has a lot of things for me to do. Right? Okay. Notice just the opposite of the Son of God who has things for me to do, the Son of God who did something for me. You see, that's how I focus my attention, and my faith is on Jesus. Jesus who loved me and gave himself for me. That's the first and foremost thing, and everything else has to fit in with that idea. Now that's, I think, Paul is telling us from his own life, that's how he lives. And I think, in a way, that's a way of saying this is what he means by don't be corrupted, don't be drawn away, don't be distracted from the simplicity of life in Christ. And the simplicity of it is this. There's Jesus. He loved me personally. He gave himself. Of course, we know he gave himself for the whole world. But see, Paul doesn't say even here who gave himself for the whole world. He makes it personal, doesn't he? That's what we should do too. There's Jesus. He loved me personally enough to give himself for me, who loved me and gave himself for me for the effect of bringing me, or the end result of bringing me into this relationship with him. Now that encompasses the fundamental simplicity of this relationship with God. Now Paul told the Corinthians, I'm afraid that the serpent might beguile you and corrupt this simple idea, or I would like to say it this way, distract you from this simple idea. So today, for the remaining part of while I talk to you, I would just like to present to you what I think the fundamental distraction is. And I've already hinted at it. The fundamental thing that distracts us as Christians from this simplicity of this relationship with Christ. And that is this idea, this thought, and this concept that we have to do something, or that he expects us to do something to improve upon it, or that there are things or works we need to do. It's almost too simple, and it is. That's why it's simple. Simplicity in Christ. It is almost too simple to say that all he wants you to do is to trust in him. You see, we think, we just suppose in some part of our minds that's sort of geared toward religious thinking, we suppose that there is some task, or there is some job, or that there is some work, or there is something that he wants us to do. Did you know that in other cultures who have never heard of Jesus and who have never heard the gospel, and faraway places on the islands in the South Pacific, they develop religious concepts. They develop religious ideas. But they've never heard of Jesus. They've never heard of, the Bible or things like that. But they develop their own kind of religious ideas. And the way it always develops is there's some kind of invisible spirit world, some kind of deities, and we have to do something for them. We have to do something to placate them. We have to make sacrifices. We have to do certain things. And it becomes a kind of a slavery and a bondage. And I think the reason I say that is I think there's part of our minds that has a kind of a religious way of thinking. And I think that is the main distraction and thing that draws us away. Now let me give you some examples. Turn to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, first of all. I'll start here. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. And the point I'm wanting to establish here is there's just one thing he wants out of us, and that's what Paul said. Faith in Jesus, that we trust in him, that we rely upon him, that we place all of our confidence in him. That's what it means to believe in him. That's what it means to have faith. While you're looking that up, I have a Bible in my office called the Phillips Translation. It was made by a man named J.B. Phillips, who was a Greek scholar. I'm not a Greek scholar. That's why I rely on these men who are. And J.B. Phillips, after he translated the New Testament into modern speech, which is, you can buy his translation called J.B. Phillips Translation of the New Testament in Modern Speech. After he wrote that, he also wrote a little book about all the things he learned while he was doing that. And in that, little gems, little pearls of wisdom, little things he learned in the process of translating the New Testament, I was fascinated to read his description or his explanation, because there's a lot in the New Testament about believing and about faith. And J.B. Phillips explained it this way. The way, in the Greek language, the way it's actually expressed, which doesn't always come across in the one single word, to believe. So what it really means is, for a person to believe in Jesus means to transfer your confidence from yourself to him. In other words, not that not that I trust Him, me too, but I got things I got to do to improve upon it. You transfer your confidence away from yourself and put it all in Him. I'm trusting Him completely, and I don't have any trust in myself. That's what it means. And I thought that was a fascinating way of explaining it. Now, verse 6, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, notice it says, but without, what's the next word? Faith. But without faith it is impossible to please Him. For he that cometh to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. Now, notice that it says, without faith it's impossible to please Him. Now, I think what's just as remarkable as what it does say is what it doesn't say. Because what it doesn't say is what most church people, I think, expect it should say. Notice that he doesn't say, without hard work and diligence, it's impossible to please Him. Now, it does say that He's a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. But notice it says, without faith, it's impossible to please Him. That tells me that the thing that pleases Him is faith. The fundamental thing that God is pleased with is for us to trust Him. Notice it doesn't say, without a holy life, it's impossible to please Him. Now, I believe a holy life is important, but it's a byproduct of faith. It's a byproduct. See, a truly holy life is something that you can't achieve. It's something only He can produce through your faith in Him. Paul wrote to the Philippians and he said, he that began a good work in you will bring it to completion. The same one that starts it, the same one that finishes it. You know, I think a lot of people think this, that I have to produce some kind of a thing in my life. I have to produce, let's say, a holy life. The trouble with it is, you don't have the capacity to do it. It would be like this. If you had a tree in your yard, I like to talk about trees because, you know, we've got these trees in our yard and I see them all the time. But if you had a tree in your yard that produced awful, terrible, poisonous, corrupt fruit, you could say to yourself, that is a bad tree and that's a bad thing that's producing this bad fruit. So I know what I'll do. I will go and remove all the bad fruit. Well, you could potentially do that, but if it's a big tree, think about how hard that would be. You'd have to get a ladder and you'd have to, you know, you could work all day on one side of the tree and then by the time you got to the other side, here it's popping out again on where you started. I mean, you would have a full-time job trying to get rid of that bad fruit. But then, if you ever got rid of the bad fruit, then you would have to say, well, there's no good fruit. See, I need to have a tree with good fruit. So you would have to somehow put good fruit in its place. So if you could ever get all the bad fruit off, and that I would say is a pretty hard job, then you would have to take a glue gun or something and glue the good fruit on in its place. And then even if you could do that, you know what you'd have then? A phony tree. You'd have an artificial tree. You'd have something that you made which wasn't real. Does that make sense? Now, the only way you can get a good tree that produces good fruit in the place of a bad tree that produces bad fruit, you've got to cut down the old tree and throw it away and plant a good one in its place. And did you know that's what God does in our lives when we believe in Jesus, when we trust in Jesus? That's why it says in 2 Corinthians 5:17, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creation. Now, I'm not a creator, and so I can't make a creation, but God's the creator, and He can make a creation, you see. And it's not that Jesus comes into our lives to make Him better and to patch us up and to make our rotten life better. He takes our old life and throws it away and plants a new life in its place. That's why Paul said, I was crucified with Christ and I no longer live, Christ lives in me. You know what that means? It means He cut down the old tree and threw it away, took it to the cross and crucified it, and He planted a new tree in its place. That is the way to orient our thinking. That's what He's done for all of us as well. So it says, without faith, it's impossible to please Him. That's the thing that pleases Him. That we, you know, notice how He doesn't say faith plus X, Y, and Z. He doesn't say faith and then 20 other things. Just faith. That's what pleases Him. That's what God is pleased with in our lives, that we trust in Him. Now, if you look at your life and you see things that need improvement and need changes, and we all could do that, see what God is pleased with is not if you say, I'll try better and I'll do better tomorrow and I'll try to fix it. That's going back to that tree and trying to pull the bad fruit off and glue the... See, if you think that way, you're making an artificial, phony... That's what the Pharisees did in Jesus' day. Did you know Jesus said, you Pharisees are hypocrites? And then He said, you clean the outside of the cup, but the inside is full of all kinds of bad things. But He said, you cleaned the outside, and they looked clean from the outside. But He said, you're hypocrites. In other words, phonies. God doesn't want phonies. He wants the real thing. You see, what you should do if you look at your life and see that there's things that need improvement or things that aren't as they should be, you need to just say to God, you've got to help with this. You that began a good work have to bring it to completion. So it's faith. Notice that it says that. Faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please Him. Not faith plus other things. Faith. And then He just says, without faith, it's impossible to please Him.